Having examined form and feeling, we now arrive at the third aggregate, perception. This aggregate is subtle because it works so quickly that we rarely notice it. The moment an experience arises, perception immediately identifies it, names it, and places it into a category. Without perception, the world would appear as an undifferentiated stream of colors, sounds, sensations, and experiences. Perception helps us navigate life, recognize danger, communicate with others, and learn from experience. Yet the Buddha also pointed out that perception can become a source of confusion when we mistake our interpretations for reality itself. To understand perception, imagine looking up at the sky and seeing a cloud. One person perceives the shape of a dragon, another sees a mountain, and another sees nothing special at all. The cloud remains the same, yet different minds perceive it differently. This simple example reveals an important truth. What we experience is often shaped as much by the mind as by the object itself. Perception does not merely record reality, it actively participates in creating the world we experience. The Pali word often translated as perception is sanya. It refers to the mind's ability to recognize and identify. When the eye sees a color, perception recognizes it as red. When the ear hears a sound, perception identifies it as music, traffic, or a familiar voice. When a memory arises, perception recognizes it as belonging to the past. Through this process, perception creates continuity and meaning in our lives. Consider meeting a close friend after many years. In an instant, the mind recognizes their face. You do not consciously analyze every feature one by one. Recognition occurs almost immediately. This is the work of perception. It gathers information from experience and matches it with patterns stored in memory. In this way, perception acts like a librarian, constantly sorting and labeling the countless experiences that arise throughout the day. Without perception, ordinary life would be impossible. We could not read words, recognize family members, or distinguish food from stones. Therefore, Buddhism does not view perception as an enemy. The problem arises when we become completely identified with our perceptions and forget that they are merely interpretations rather than ultimate truth. Perception depends heavily upon memory. Every label we apply comes from previous experiences. A child who has never seen fire may not understand its danger. An experienced traveler can instantly recognize signs that others overlook. What we perceive is influenced by what we have learned, remembered, and experienced throughout our lives. Imagine two people walking through a forest. One is a botanist who has studied plants for decades. The other has little knowledge of nature. The botanist notices dozens of species, subtle patterns, and relationships among the plants. The other person sees only a collection of trees and bushes. The forest has not changed, but perception differs because of differing backgrounds and experiences. This shows that perception is not entirely objective. It is shaped by conditioning. Our education, culture, family, beliefs, and personal history all influence how we interpret the world. The same event can be experienced very differently by different people because each person's perception is filtering reality through a unique set of conditions. Perception does more than recognize objects. It often creates stories around them. This is where suffering frequently begins. Suppose a coworker passes by without greeting you. Perception immediately labels the event. The mind may conclude, "They are upset with me." A chain of thoughts follows. Perhaps you begin worrying about what you did wrong. Hours later, you discover the coworker simply did not notice you because they were distracted by a personal problem. The original experience was simple. A person walked by without speaking. The suffering arose from the interpretation attached to the event. We often mistake these mental stories for facts. As a result, we react to our perceptions rather than to reality itself. This tendency appears everywhere. A compliment may be perceived as sincere by one person and sarcastic by another. A rainy day may be perceived as beautiful by a farmer and disappointing by someone planning a picnic. The event remains the same, but perception transforms its meaning. Human beings rely heavily on labels. We label people, situations, objects, and even ourselves. While labels are useful for communication, they can also become prisons. When we repeatedly think of someone as difficult, we begin noticing only the behaviors that confirm that label. When we think of ourselves as a failure, every mistake appears to support that conclusion. Perception becomes selective, highlighting information that matches existing beliefs while ignoring evidence that contradicts them. Imagine looking through colored glasses. Everything appears tinted by that color. In the same way, our perceptions color experience according to our expectations and assumptions. The more attached we become to our labels, the less able we are to see things freshly. The Buddha encouraged practitioners to observe this process carefully. By recognizing labels as mental constructions, we become less trapped by them. We begin to see that every person and every situation is more complex than the categories we impose upon them. Perception plays a major role in emotional suffering. Often it is not the event itself that causes distress, but the meaning we assign to it. A person hears criticism and perceives it as a personal attack. Another hears the same criticism and perceives it as helpful feedback. One becomes angry and defensive, while the other becomes grateful. The words were identical, yet the emotional response differed because perception differed. This does not mean all suffering is imaginary. Painful experiences are real. However, the mind frequently amplifies suffering through interpretation. A small problem becomes a catastrophe. A temporary setback becomes proof of permanent failure. A neutral event becomes a threat. Through mindfulness, we begin to separate direct experience from the stories created by perception. This allows us to respond more wisely, rather than being carried away by automatic reactions. One of the most important teachings of Buddhism is that perception contributes to the construction of what we call self. From childhood onward, perception gathers countless labels. I am intelligent. I am unattractive. I am successful. I am shy. I am spiritual. Over time, these labels accumulate into a narrative that feels solid and permanent. Yet, upon examination, this identity is built from changing perceptions and memories. Consider how differently you view yourself today compared to 10 years ago. Many of the beliefs you once held about yourself may have changed completely. The self-image that once seemed unquestionable may now appear inaccurate or incomplete. The Buddha encouraged practitioners to investigate these identities carefully. Are they permanent? Are they completely reliable? Or are they simply perceptions arising and passing, like all other mental phenomena? The Heart Sutra later states that perception is empty. This statement is often misunderstood. Emptiness does not mean perception does not exist. Rather, it means perception lacks an independent, permanent essence. Perception depends upon countless causes and conditions. It depends upon sense organs, objects, memory, language, culture, mood, expectations, and countless other factors. Remove these conditions, and the perception changes. Think of a rainbow. It appears vividly in the sky, yet it cannot exist independently. It depends on sunlight, moisture, and the position of the observer. Likewise, perception appears real and functional, but it arises through conditions and cannot be found as a fixed entity. Seeing this emptiness frees us from blind attachment to our interpretations. We become less certain that our immediate judgments are absolute truth. This openness creates space for wisdom and compassion. Meditation provides an opportunity to study perception directly. As you sit quietly, sounds arise. Notice how quickly the mind labels them. Bird, car, wind, voice. Thoughts arise and the mind labels them as important, unimportant, pleasant, or unpleasant. Instead of following the labels, simply observe them. Notice how perception continuously categorizes experience. Notice how quickly judgments arise. Notice how labels influence emotions and reactions. Over time, this observation reveals something profound. Perceptions are not commands that must be obeyed. They are mental events appearing within awareness. When this is understood, the mind becomes less reactive and more spacious. Gradually, we learn to meet experience with curiosity rather than certainty. We become willing to question our assumptions and investigate reality more deeply. This is the beginning of wisdom. Perception is the aggregate that recognizes, identifies, and labels experience. It allows us to function in the world, communicate with others, and learn from life. Yet perception is not a perfect mirror of reality. It is shaped by memory, conditioning, expectations, and countless other influences. Because of this, our perceptions can sometimes mislead us, creating unnecessary suffering and reinforcing mistaken views. The Heart Sutra invites us to look beyond appearances and recognize that perception itself is empty, dependent, changing, and without fixed essence. As we observe perception carefully, we become less attached to our labels, judgments, and assumptions. We begin to see the world with greater clarity and openness. In the next lesson, we will explore the fourth aggregate, mental formations. Here we will investigate the habits, intentions, impulses, and conditioned patterns that shape our actions and continually influence the course of our lives.